Welcome to Frema Audiobooks, where your financial wisdom deepens, your mindset transforms, and your entire relationship with wealth evolves as you begin this powerful journey through the compound effect of investing. Grow rich slowly and surely, a guide created to show you how steady, disciplined investing turns ordinary people into extraordinary wealth builders over time. You will discover the magic of letting small decisions build massive results. You will learn how slow, steady growth becomes unstoppable when you remain consistent. You will understand why compounding is the most powerful wealth-generating force available to every investor, regardless of income or background. You will see how tiny contributions, when multiplied by time, create financial futures most people never imagine. You will learn why patience is the investor's greatest weapon. You will uncover how compounding rewards discipline, commitment, and long-term thinking. You will understand how the smallest actions become the biggest transformations. You will see how long-term investing protects you from emotions, fear, and market chaos. You will discover how time turns modest beginnings into massive outcomes. You will rise into the mindset of someone who builds wealth slowly, intentionally, and powerfully. You will gain clarity on how compounding quietly shapes your financial destiny. You will learn to trust the process that grows wealth silently in the background. You will realize that getting rich slowly is not only wise, it is inevitable when you apply the compound effect consistently. And before we begin this life-changing journey, make sure you subscribe to Frema Audiobooks, like this video, comment your long-term investing goal, and share this audiobook with someone who needs to understand the power of time, because today, you begin learning how to grow rich slowly, surely, and permanently. You begin your journey with the compound effect when you understand that wealth is not built through sudden leaps, but through consistent steps taken over long periods. Because the smallest financial habits become life-changing when multiplied by time. You grow in clarity when you realize that every dollar you invest today becomes $10 tomorrow and $100 later. You elevate your patience when you see that small contributions are not insignificant, they are seeds. You gain foresight when you recognize that compounding rewards the disciplined far more than the gifted. You rise in emotional peace when you stop expecting overnight results. You elevate your belief in yourself when you understand that you don't need a high income to become wealthy. You grow in wisdom when you value progress over perfection. You gain confidence when you track how small actions add up. You rise in identity when you become someone who thinks long-term. You elevate your understanding when you see how time works in your favor. You grow in strength when you accept that slow growth is still growth. You gain motivation when your early contributions begin to multiply. You rise in maturity when patience becomes your strategy. You elevate your future when consistency becomes your daily ritual. You win every day when you take small steps that compound into greatness. You elevate your compound effect mastery when you learn the rule that tiny, consistent investments outperform large, inconsistent ones, because consistency fuels the compounding engine. You grow in financial discipline when you invest regularly, even if the amount is small. You elevate your emotional strength when you lean on routine instead of motivation. You gain clarity when you focus on steady contributions rather than perfect timing. You rise in confidence when your routine creates predictable growth. You elevate your judgment when you prioritize rhythm over intensity. You grow in foresight when you understand how compound interest thrives on consistency. You gain stability when you automate your investing. You rise in capability when consistency becomes effortless. You elevate your identity when people recognize you as someone committed to long-term wealth. You grow in motivation when you see your contributions accumulate. You gain emotional freedom when consistency removes stress. You rise in maturity when you value commitment over excitement. You elevate your future when every small step adds to your growing foundation. You win every day when consistency builds unstoppable momentum. You rise into the true power of the compound effect when you understand that time is your greatest partner, because the longer your money remains invested, the more rapidly it multiplies. You grow in vision when you allow decades, not days, to shape your expectations. You elevate your patience when you trust the slow-growing seed of wealth. You gain strength when you stop comparing your progress to others who chase shortcuts. You rise in emotional peace when you understand that even small beginnings become massive with time. You elevate your mindset when you prioritize longevity over immediate payoff. You grow in clarity when you visualize how your money grows exponentially. You gain confidence when time does the heavy lifting. You rise in maturity when you stop trying to rush what naturally expands. You elevate your capability when time multiplies your effort. You grow in identity when you call yourself a long-term investor. You gain resilience when time protects you from emotional decisions. You rise in purpose when you invest with 20 years in mind instead of 20 minutes. You elevate your future when time becomes your greatest financial ally. You win every day when you let time grow your wealth. You elevate your financial path when you understand the rule that compounding works best when you reinvest your returns, because the reinvested earnings generate more earnings, creating unstoppable acceleration. You grow in financial intelligence when you refuse to spend your early gains. You elevate your discipline when you allow your profits to remain invested. You gain foresight when you understand that reinvesting is the engine behind exponential growth. You rise in emotional control when you resist the temptation to cash out early. You elevate your strategy when you feed your compounding system instead of interrupting it. You grow in wisdom when reinvestment becomes automatic. You gain momentum when your investments begin earning on top of your initial contributions. You rise in identity when you think like someone building long-term wealth. You elevate your future vision when you imagine your returns multiplied over decades. You grow in stability when your compounded growth strengthens your financial foundation. You gain strength when reinvestment accelerates your results. You rise in maturity when you let compounding unfold naturally. You elevate your future when your returns begin generating their own returns. You win every day when reinvesting becomes your greatest habit. You rise into investing mastery when you learn the rule that compounding requires protection, because your money cannot multiply if it is constantly withdrawn, disrupted, or abandoned prematurely. You grow in responsibility when you guard your investments against emotional decisions. You elevate your patience when you resist pulling money out during market drops. You gain clarity when you understand that stability accelerates compounding. You rise in confidence when you create an investing environment free from interruptions. You elevate your emotional maturity when you stop sabotaging your progress. You grow in foresight when you see how staying invested multiplies your outcomes. You gain resilience when you protect your long-term plan. You rise in identity when you behave like someone committed to generational wealth. You elevate your strength when consistency outweighs impulsivity. You grow in wisdom when you stop trying to outsmart the markets. You gain stability when you allow your money to grow untouched. You rise in discipline when you treat your investments like seeds that must remain planted. You elevate your future when you protect your compounding engine. You win every day when you stay invested long enough to become wealthy. You elevate your financial growth when you understand that the compound effect works silently, because the greatest wealth is often built in the background while your life continues forward. You grow in trust when you allow your investments to develop without constant interference. You elevate your emotional peace when you understand that quiet growth is still powerful growth. You gain vision when you imagine how your money multiplies even when you sleep. You rise in discipline when you avoid checking your portfolio obsessively. You elevate your maturity when you embrace stillness rather than constant adjustment. You grow in foresight when you understand that silence hides exponential expansion. You gain perspective when you realize that compounding doesn't shout, it accumulates. You rise in capability when you recognize the value of patience. You elevate your confidence when you understand that slow progress today becomes explosive growth later. You grow in emotional mastery when you avoid being rattled by temporary stagnation. You gain clarity when you trust the invisible mathematics working on your behalf. You rise in identity when you become someone who respects quiet growth. You elevate your future when you stay committed despite not seeing daily changes. You win every day when you allow wealth to grow silently and surely. You rise into deeper compound effect wisdom when you realize that your habits matter more than your income, because wealthy people are created through behavior, not salary size. You grow in responsibility when you align your habits with your financial goals. You elevate your intelligence when you prioritize saving over spending. You gain strength when you build routines that support investing. You raise an emotional discipline when you stop letting small temptations interrupt long-term progress. You elevate your mindset when you follow habits that strengthen your future. You grow in confidence when your actions reflect your goals. You gain stability when your habits become automatic. You rise in maturity when you replace destructive behaviors with smarter ones. You elevate your identity when you call yourself someone who invests consistently. You grow in wisdom when you learn that wealth is not about luck. You gain direction when your habits build momentum. You rise in capability when you choose habits that compound positively. You elevate your future when your financial behaviors become unstoppable forces. You win every day when your habits reflect your future wealth. You elevate your long-term wealth strategy when you understand that the compound effect rewards consistency far more than intensity, because small regular contributions outperform big irregular ones. You grow in discipline when you invest the same amount month after month. You elevate your emotional strength when you rely on routine instead of impulsiveness. You gain clarity when you stop chasing perfect timing. You rise in intelligence when you commit to a fixed schedule. You elevate your identity when consistency becomes part of your financial character. You grow in confidence when you see your contributions accumulate steadily. You gain momentum when your system runs automatically. You rise in strategic power when regular deposits drive your compounding engine. You elevate your resilience when market volatility no longer disrupts your routine. You grow in maturity when you value steady growth over chaotic attempts. You gain capability when your routine becomes second nature. You rise in patience when you understand that compounding requires long-term commitment. You elevate your future when consistency amplifies your returns. You win every day when your steady actions feed your exponential outcomes. You rise into the compounding mindset when you accept that setbacks are temporary, but growth is permanent, because long-term investors understand that dips, drops, and declines are simply part of the compounding journey. You grow in wisdom when you see downturns as opportunities instead of dangers. You elevate your confidence when you stop fearing market corrections. You gain strength when you stay invested through uncertainty. You rise in emotional maturity when you understand that compounding works best when you don't panic. You elevate your perspective when you zoom out instead of reacting to short-term noise. You grow in discipline when you trust your long-term plan. You gain clarity when you understand that every drop in value is temporary. You rise in strategy when you recognize the benefit of buying during downturns. You elevate your identity when you behave like a patient, seasoned investor. You grow in resilience when you welcome volatility as part of the journey. You gain capability when you remain calm during financial storms. You rise in foresight when you understand downturns strengthen your long-term returns. You elevate your future when you stay focused on decades, not days. You win every day when you honor the long-term nature of compounding. You elevate your compounding success when you understand that every financial decision either accelerates or slows your growth, because the compound effect responds to every choice you make. You grow in awareness when you evaluate the long-term consequences of your spending. You elevate your clarity when you stop making emotional purchases. You gain discipline when you choose saving over short-term gratification. You rise in maturity when you prioritize future wealth over instant pleasure. You elevate your intelligence when you understand that small setbacks compound to just in the wrong direction. You grow in responsibility when every choice becomes intentional. You gain momentum when smart decisions stack up positively. You rise in identity when you behave like someone building generational wealth. You elevate your emotional strength when you understand how much power is hidden in every choice. You grow in foresight when you imagine how today's decisions shape tomorrow's results. You gain capability when your daily choices align with your long-term goals. You rise in power when you choose actions that compound upward. You elevate your future when every decision becomes a step toward greater wealth. You win every day when your choices strengthen your compounding journey. You rise into long-term wealth when you understand that the compound effect requires emotional neutrality, because emotional reactions interrupt growth, while calm consistency accelerates it. You grow in inner strength when you refuse to panic during downturns. You elevate your confidence when you stop letting fear dictate your decisions. You gain wisdom when you detach from short-term fluctuations. You rise in emotional control when you understand that compounding thrives in stability. You elevate your awareness when you recognize how emotions sabotage financial growth. You grow in maturity when you choose logic over impulses. You gain clarity when you evaluate investments with a calm mind. You rise in discipline when you avoid decisions based on stress. You elevate your strategy when emotional neutrality becomes part of your identity. You grow in capability when you remain steady while others overreact. You gain foresight when you understand how emotional stability multiplies your returns. You rise in strength when you protect your compounding engine from panic. You elevate your future when calmness becomes your superpower. You win every day when emotional control supports exponential growth. You elevate your compounding mastery when you accept that wealth grows slowly at first and explosively later, because exponential growth begins quietly before becoming undeniable. You grow in patience when you stop expecting fast results. You elevate your understanding when you see that compounding is backloaded. You gain strength when you push through the slow early stages. You rise in maturity when you accept that early years are foundational. You elevate your confidence when you visualize the later exponential curve. You grow in motivation when you see numbers doubling over time. You gain perspective when you recognize that most people quit before the explosion happens. You rise in clarity when you commit to staying invested long enough to witness exponential growth. You elevate your discipline when you remain loyal to the process during the quiet phase. You grow in identity when you define yourself as someone who finishes what others abandon. You gain foresight when you realize how powerful the final years of compounding truly are. You rise in intelligence when you understand that slow early growth is normal. You elevate your future when you embrace the pace of exponential progress. You win every day when you stay long enough to let compounding reward you. You rise into stronger investing wisdom when you understand that the compound effect thrives on routine, because the best financial results come from habits, not occasional actions. You grow in structure when you create systems to automate your investments. You elevate your discipline when your routine runs without emotion. You gain stability when your investing becomes predictable. You rise in capability when your habits align with your goals. You elevate your clarity when your routine makes decision-making easier. You grow in foresight when you plan your investing schedule. You gain momentum when your actions become automatic. You rise in confidence when you see how routine creates results. You elevate your emotional balance when structure reduces stress. You grow in maturity when you prioritize habit over excitement. You gain identity when you see yourself as someone who invests regularly. You rise in wisdom when you understand how habits multiply over time. You elevate your future when your routine strengthens your compounding engine. You win every day when routine accelerates your wealth. You elevate your compound effect growth when you understand that distractions weaken focus, because sustained wealth requires undivided attention on long-term outcomes. You grow in awareness when you identify what pulls you away from your goals. You elevate your discipline when you eliminate habits that drain your financial energy. You gain clarity when you remove noise from your financial life. You rise in intelligence when you focus on strategies that truly matter. You elevate your maturity when distractions lose their influence. You grow in identity when you think like someone building wealth consistently. You gain momentum when your focus sharpens. You rise in confidence when you commit to your financial path. You elevate your emotional stability when you stop chasing every new trend. You grow in capability when your attention remains anchored on your compounding strategy. You gain perspective when you realize how distractions delay progress. You rise in wisdom when you stay loyal to your long-term plan. You elevate your future when focus becomes your asset. You win every day when clarity guides your growth. You rise into financial greatness when you understand that compounding rewards patience more than intelligence, because the biggest wins go to those who wait, not those who overthink. You grow in strength when you trust time more than talent. You elevate your emotional maturity when patience replaces urgency. You gain confidence when you appreciate the power of waiting. You rise in capability when you stop trying to outsmart the markets. You elevate your clarity when you understand that consistency beats cleverness. You grow in identity when you become someone who values patience. You gain momentum when you hold your investments long enough to see them multiply. You rise in discipline when you avoid unnecessary actions. You elevate your wisdom when you understand the relationship between patience and exponential growth. You grow in foresight when you imagine what your patience creates over decades. You gain peace when waiting becomes natural. You rise in purpose when patience shapes your decisions. You elevate your future when time becomes your most loyal partner. You win every day when patience builds your wealth slowly and surely. You elevate your financial evolution when you understand that compounding requires you to stay invested through boredom, because the most powerful growth happens long after the excitement fades. You grow in maturity when you realize that wealth is built during the quiet seasons. You elevate your discipline when you keep contributing even when nothing dramatic is happening. You gain emotional strength when you accept that boredom is part of greatness. You rise in foresight when you understand that compounding works even when you can't see it. You elevate your confidence when you stay consistent during flat periods. You grow in patience when you resist the urge to search for excitement. You gain clarity when you avoid making changes simply because progress seems slow. You rise in identity strength when you accept that boredom is part of greatness. You rise in foresight when you understand that compounding works even when you can't see it. You elevate your confidence when you stay consistent during flat periods. You grow in patience when you resist the urge to search for excitement. You gain clarity when you avoid making changes simply because progress seems slow. You rise in identity. You rise into smart investing when you understand that the compound effect expands when you increase your contributions, because adding even small amounts dramatically accelerates your final outcome. You grow in motivation when you increase your deposits even slightly. You elevate your financial strength when you treat raises as investing opportunities. You gain momentum when your contributions grow with your income. You rise in capability when you commit to raising your investments annually. You elevate your discipline when you prioritize investing over lifestyle expansion. You grow in intelligence when you recognize how small increases trigger large results. You gain clarity when you track the impact of contribution growth. You rise in identity when you see yourself as someone committed to expansion. You elevate your foresight when you imagine future wealth from today's increases. You grow in patience when contribution boosts become a habit. You gain power when your compounding engine receives more fuel. You rise in maturity when you choose growth over comfort. You elevate your future where each increase becomes a stepping stone to greater wealth. You win every day when your contributions climb consistently. Underscore. You elevate your long-term investment progress when you understand that the compound effect strengthens when you avoid taking money out prematurely, because interruptions weaken exponential growth. You grow in responsibility when you protect your investments from unnecessary withdrawals. You elevate your emotional discipline when you resist touching your wealth too soon. You gain clarity when you recognize how early withdrawals sabotage your future. You rise in intelligence when you create a separate emergency fund. You elevate your stability when you ensure your investments can remain untouched. You grow in foresight when you prepare for unexpected expenses outside your portfolio. You gain resilience when you protect your compounding engine from disruption. You rise in identity when you behave like a committed wealth builder. You elevate your confidence when your investments remain uninterrupted. You grow in maturity when you separate short-term needs from long-term goals. You gain momentum when your compounding remains consistent. You rise in security when you preserve your principle and your growth. You elevate your future when your investments stay planted long enough to thrive. You win every day when you resist breaking your compounding cycle. You rise into investor intelligence when you understand that the compound effect thrives on low-cost investments, because high fees quietly steal compounding potential year after year. You grow in awareness when you evaluate expense ratios carefully. You elevate your intelligence when you choose cost-efficient funds. You gain clarity when you realize how small fees become massive losses over decades. You rise in discipline when you prioritize simplicity and affordability. You elevate your long-term returns when you avoid overpriced products. You grow in foresight when you understand how fees reduce compounding speed. You gain stability when more of your money stays invested. You rise in capability when you analyze how expenses affect your future wealth. You elevate your judgment when you choose low-fee index funds. You grow in maturity when cost awareness becomes part of your strategy. You gain opportunity when lower fees increase your long-term growth. You rise in identity when you think like a prudent investor. You elevate your future when cost efficiency strengthens your compounding. You win every day when your fees stay low and your wealth grows high. You elevate your compounding mindset when you understand that diversification strengthens long-term growth, because spreading your investments across different assets protects your exponential progress from unnecessary risk. You grow in clarity when you recognize how diversification shields your portfolio. You elevate your emotional stability when diversified assets reduce volatility stress. You gain perspective when you see how different sectors behave over time. You rise in maturity when you avoid concentrating your wealth in one place. You elevate your judgment when you balance risk across multiple categories. You grow in resilience when diversification keeps you invested during downturns. You gain confidence when your portfolio becomes safer and stronger. You rise in identity when you behave like a thoughtful wealth architect. You elevate your discipline when you diversify consistently. You grow in intelligence when you recognize that diversification supports compounding. You gain foresight when you choose investments that complement each other. You rise in capability when your portfolio becomes stable. You elevate your future when diversification multiplies your long-term outcomes. You win every day when you protect your compounding with balance. You elevate your compounding journey when you understand that automation is your greatest ally, because automating your investing ensures consistency even when motivation fades. You grow in confidence when your contributions happen on schedule without effort. You elevate your stability when automation removes emotional hesitation. You gain clarity when your investments deposit like clockwork. You rise in discipline when your systems handle the work. You elevate your peace when automation eliminates the risk of forgetting or delaying. You grow in capability when technology supports your financial life. You gain security when automated investing protects your long-term plan. You rise in identity when you behave like someone who values consistency. You elevate your strategy when automation builds momentum. You grow in foresight when you see how automated contributions accelerate compounding. You gain emotional strength when automation removes doubt. You rise in maturity when you rely on dependable systems. You elevate your future when automation becomes your compounding engine. You win every day when your investments grow automatically. You rise into deeper compounding wisdom when you accept that comparison is a trap, because looking at someone else's progress distracts you from your own powerful journey. You grow in emotional intelligence when you resist comparing your timeline to others. You elevate your confidence when you focus on your own path. You gain clarity when you understand that every investor starts at a different point. You rise in strength when you honor your personal financial pace. You elevate your emotional peace when you stop measuring yourself against strangers. You grow in maturity when you appreciate your unique journey. You gain stability when comparison no longer steals your energy. You rise in identity when you value your process. You elevate your wisdom when you understand that progress is not a race. You grow in capability when you stay focused on your own compounding. You gain foresight when you imagine your future without distraction. You rise in empowerment when confidence replaces comparison. You elevate your future when your energy stays directed toward your growth. You win every day when you celebrate your path. You elevate your investing strength when you understand that the compound effect multiplies your mindset, because the beliefs you hold shape the actions you take and the results you receive. You grow in awareness when you examine your beliefs about wealth. You elevate your confidence when you see yourself as a long-term investor. You gain courage when you replace limiting beliefs with empowering ones. You rise in emotional peace when your mindset matches your goals. You elevate your clarity when your beliefs align with compounding principles. You grow in identity when you think like someone building lifelong wealth. You gain momentum when your mindset propels your actions. You rise in foresight when you understand that mindset fuels consistency. You elevate your discipline when you protect your thoughts from negativity. You grow in maturity when you develop patience, resilience, and vision. You gain capability when your mindset supports your routine. You rise in intelligence when you strengthen the beliefs that empower growth. You elevate your future when your mindset multiplies your compounding results. You win every day when your beliefs fuel your wealth. You rise into greater clarity when you understand that compounding thrives when your expenses stay low, because the less you spend, the more you can invest, and the faster your wealth grows. You grow in responsibility when you eliminate financial waste. You elevate your discipline when you choose intentional spending. You gain strength when you direct more resources toward your investments. You rise in emotional maturity when you prioritize long-term goals over short-term desires. You elevate your wisdom when you see how lifestyle inflation slows compounding. You grow in awareness when you track your spending patterns. You gain opportunity when you reduce unnecessary financial drains. You rise in capability when you allocate money strategically. You elevate your focus when you align your spending with your future. You grow in identity when you live below your means. You gain momentum when savings translate into investments. You rise in resilience when financial discipline becomes natural. You elevate your future when your lifestyle supports compounding. You win every day when frugality multiplies your wealth. You elevate your wealth-building potential when you understand that financial education accelerates compounding, because knowledge helps you avoid mistakes, optimize decisions, and identify long-term opportunities. You grow in intelligence when you commit to continuous learning. You elevate your confidence when you understand the mechanics of markets. You gain clarity when you educate yourself on different asset classes. You rise in strategy when you recognize how economic trends influence growth. You elevate your foresight when you learn from experienced investors. You grow in capability when knowledge strengthens your decisions. You gain momentum when education reveals new opportunities. You rise in emotional stability when financial understanding reduces fear. You elevate your judgment when learning replaces impulsiveness. You grow in identity when you commit to lifelong financial mastery. You gain strength when education sharpens your habits. You rise in maturity when knowledge replaces confusion. You elevate your future when education becomes a compounding asset. You win every day when learning multiplies your wealth-building power. You rise deeper into compounding mastery when you understand that reviewing your progress strengthens your growth, because tracking your results helps you see what is working and where to improve. You grow in awareness when you measure your contributions and returns. You elevate your clarity when you analyze how your money has grown over time. You gain confidence when you see the upward curve forming. You rise in intelligence when your decisions come from real data. You elevate your discipline when tracking becomes part of your routine. You grow in capability when you adjust based on clear observations. You gain momentum when progress motivates consistency. You rise in maturity when tracking replaces guessing. You elevate your foresight when you understand how today's numbers predict tomorrow's outcomes. You grow in emotional strength when progress reduces doubt. You gain identity when you act like a serious, intentional investor. You rise in stability when tracking keeps your strategy aligned. You elevate your future when awareness strengthens your compounding plan. You win every day when your progress becomes visible and inspiring. You elevate your investing foundation when you realize that your environment shapes your financial growth, because the people and influences around you determine your habits, beliefs, and expectations. You grow in clarity when you distance yourself from negativity. You elevate your mindset when you surround yourself with disciplined thinkers. You gain emotional strength when you avoid people who discourage long-term investing. You rise in identity when you connect with other wealth builders. You elevate your perspective when your environment supports your goals. You grow in capability when mentors and peers challenge you to expand. You gain motivation when you see others succeeding slowly and steadily. You rise in discipline when your surroundings push you toward consistency. You elevate your wisdom when you learn from those who built wealth intentionally. You grow in emotional balance when your environment reduces fear. You gain confidence when you feel supported on your journey. You rise in foresight when you build networks that last decades. You elevate your future when your community multiplies your compounding efforts. You win every day when your environment aligns with your wealth. You rise into disciplined wealth when you understand that compounding accelerates when you avoid debt, because interest working against you destroys the growth interest creates for you. You grow in responsibility when you confront unhealthy debt habits. You elevate your intelligence when you recognize how debt slows compounding. You gain clarity when you differentiate between good debt and destructive debt. You rise in control when you stop letting debt eat your future. You elevate your financial stability when you repay high-interest burdens quickly. You grow in maturity when you refuse to borrow for instant gratification. You gain emotional peace when you eliminate financial pressure. You rise in capability when more of your income stays available for investing. You elevate your identity when you behave like someone protecting their future. You grow in foresight when you calculate how debt delays wealth. You gain strength when you build wealth instead of obligations. You rise in security when your investments grow faster than your liabilities. You elevate your future when compounding replaces debt cycles. You win every day when reducing debt amplifies your wealth-building power. You elevate your financial transformation when you understand that the compound effect strengthens when you stay consistent through life changes, because your commitment must outlast challenges, interruptions, and unpredictable events. You grow in resilience when you continue investing even during tough seasons. You elevate your emotional strength when you prioritize your long-term plan despite short-term struggles. You gain clarity when you adjust your contributions instead of abandoning them. You rise in identity when you refuse to let obstacles stop your growth. You elevate your discipline when consistency remains steady through fluctuations. You grow in capability when you adapt without giving up. You gain momentum when persistence shapes your future. You rise in maturity when life's changes no longer disrupt your financial habits. You elevate your wisdom when commitment becomes part of your character. You grow in stability when your plan survives storms. You gain foresight when you prepare for difficult seasons. You rise in empowerment when you prove you can continue despite adversity. You elevate your future when consistency outlasts challenges. You win every day when your financial commitment becomes unbreakable. You rise into advanced compound effect thinking when you understand that the quality of your investments matters, because strong assets grow exponentially while weak assets decay over time. You grow in intelligence when you study which investments perform best historically. You elevate your judgment when you prioritize proven long-term vehicles. You gain clarity when you choose assets built to grow. You rise in capability when you understand how to evaluate performance. You elevate your wisdom when you select investments that align with your risk tolerance. You grow in foresight when you study long-term charts instead of short-term noise. You gain confidence when you invest in quality other than trends. You rise in emotional stability when quality assets reduce uncertainty. You elevate your identity when you think like a thoughtful wealth builder. You grow in strength when you avoid risky shortcuts. You gain maturity when you prioritize performance over popularity. You rise in perspective when you understand how strong assets compound faster. You elevate your future when quality multiplies your outcomes. You win every day when strong investments fuel your long-term success. You elevate your investing evolution when you understand that compounding strengthens when you increase your financial literacy, because knowledge multiplies your ability to make wise decisions that pay dividends for decades. You grow in confidence when you understand how markets truly behave. You elevate your clarity when you learn how inflation, interest, taxes, and economic cycles affect your wealth. You gain intelligence when you study investment vehicles that align with your future. You rise in emotional peace when knowledge reduces anxiety. You elevate your maturity when you replace guesswork with understanding. You grow in capability when learning becomes part of your journey. You gain motivation when financial education reveals new opportunities. You rise in foresight when you understand long-term historical trends. You elevate your identity when you think like an informed investor. You grow in strength when understanding protects you from fear-driven decisions. You gain resilience when knowledge prepares you for market storms. You rise in stability when you make informed choices. You elevate your future when education fuels compounding. You win every day when knowledge amplifies your financial power. You rise into advanced compounding awareness when you understand that small adjustments create massive future differences, because tiny positive changes compound just as fast as money does. You grow in appreciation when you learn how 1% improvements multiply results. You elevate your discipline when you refine your habits little by little. You gain clarity when you see how subtle shifts create noticeable outcomes. You rise in confidence when you improve just slightly every day. You elevate your foresight when you imagine how small upgrades accumulate over decades. You grow in identity when improvement becomes part of who you are. You gain momentum when small wins inspire bigger action. You rise in intelligence when you embrace Kaizen philosophy of continuous improvement. You elevate your emotional control when small steps feel manageable. You grow in capability when you break overwhelming goals into tiny pieces. You gain purpose when small progress keeps you moving. You rise in maturity when you learn to celebrate micro wins. You elevate your future when minor adjustments compound into major achievements. You win every day when small changes shape great outcomes. You elevate your financial stability when you understand that compounding thrives on protection, because guarding your investments from unnecessary risks ensures long-term growth. You grow in awareness when you learn how insurance protects your assets. You elevate your judgment when you create safeguards around your wealth. You gain clarity when you understand how legal and financial protection preserves compounding. You rise in foresight when you prepare for unexpected events. You elevate your discipline when you build protective structures proactively. You grow in emotional peace when you know you're shielded from setbacks. You gain maturity when you understand that wealth is not just built, it must be defended. You rise in identity when you behave like someone serious about their financial future. You elevate your capability when your protection strategies strengthen your security. You grow in intelligence when you minimize avoidable risks. You gain stability when your compounding remains uninterrupted. You rise in confidence when your wealth is safeguarded. You elevate your future when protection supports exponential growth. You win every day when your compounding engine remains secure. You rise into powerful compounding action when you understand that execution unlocks results, because knowledge without action produces nothing, while consistent action ignites exponential growth. You grow in confidence when you implement what you learn. You elevate your discipline when you consistently take steps toward your future. You gain capability when you move from theory to practice. You rise in emotional strength when you stop procrastinating. You elevate your clarity when action reinforces your goals. You grow in resilience when active effort becomes part of your lifestyle. You gain momentum when you make progress regularly. You rise in identity when you become someone who acts with purpose. You elevate your motivation when action fuels results. You grow in wisdom when your experience teaches you more than theory ever could. You gain opportunity when execution creates real-world outcomes. You rise in foresight when you anticipate the rewards of consistent effort. You elevate your future where action accelerates compounding. You win every day where action multiplies your wealth. You elevate your compound effect journey when you understand that long-term vision fuels exponential outcomes, because wealthy people think in decades, not days. You grow in perspective when you imagine your life 20 years from now. You elevate your clarity when you align your decisions with that future. You gain emotional peace when long-term vision reduces short-term pressure. You rise in capability when your future pulls you forward. You elevate your judgment when you look beyond temporary noise. You grow in identity when you think like a generational builder. You gain momentum when long-term direction guides your daily habits. You rise in strength when you anchor your choices in your future self. You elevate your strategy when long-term thinking eliminates impulsiveness. You grow in stability when your vision becomes your compass. You gain resilience when challenges feel small compared to your future. You rise in maturity when you let time work for you. You elevate your future when long-term vision shapes your compounding. You win every day when your future guides your present. You complete your journey through the compound effect of investing when you realize that wealth is never built overnight, but always built through patience, discipline, consistency, and long-term trust in the process. You rise in identity when you see yourself as someone capable of building lifelong wealth. You elevate your clarity when you recognize that every small action moves you closer to financial freedom. You gain strength when you accept that slow, steady growth is the most powerful form of wealth creation. You rise in emotional stability when you trust the curve of exponential progress. You elevate your financial maturity when you remain invested through uncertainty. You grow in foresight when you imagine how your decisions today will bless your future. You gain confidence when you see small steps begin to multiply into real results. You rise in wisdom when you choose consistency over chaos. You elevate your strategy when you refine your habits with intention. You grow in purpose when you understand that compounding rewards those who stay the course. You gain stability when your investing becomes a lifelong habit, not a temporary experiment. You rise in destiny when you realize you are building wealth that outlasts you. You elevate your future when you commit to slow and steady success. And as you continue growing rich slowly and surely, make sure you subscribe to Frema Audiobooks, like this video, comment your long-term investing goal, and share this audiobook with someone ready to build unstoppable wealth through the power of compounding.